Hey everybody, it's Clayton Smith here, and I have the Everyday Millionaire, Patrick Francy, with me here. And Patrick is here at the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference, and he is checking things out, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of his insights. We're going to talk about his podcast, and a little bit about what brought him here today, and some of the takeaways that he has. So, Patrick, how are you doing?
I'm fantastic.
Great to see you.
You as well.
All right, so first off, tell us a little bit about your podcast, and let's go from there.
Well, my podcast, The Everyday Millionaire, I'm into my 8th season now. It's primarily audio, although I am into the YouTube space a little bit. That's not my primary focus right now, but it's been in the audio space. Like you say, we've been doing 8 years. The premise of the show is that I'm interviewing seemingly ordinary individuals who have achieved extraordinary results, and that's really what the premise of it was. I often investigate the question of, entrepreneurship. Is it nature or is it nurture? So I'm having conversations with my guests of what do you do today, but how did you get to where you are? What was your upbringing? How were your siblings? What was your family all about? Like I get into the kind of the background of how it is they got onto their journey and where did they gain their entrepreneurship from, their tenacity, their skills. And I try to come from a space of anybody listening can look at it and go, oh, if they can do it, I can do it too. So that's kind of where the approach I take in the interview of that. And it's a long format. It's usually an hour and 15.
Okay, great. Well, now we get to turn the tables here. Now
sure,
you're on the spotlight. Now you're here, and we get to talk a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah.
And so what got you to the point where you now have a podcast called The Everyday Millionaire? How did you become the Everyday Millionaire?
Well, it's interesting. The journey for me was, I've had 2 or 3 what I refer to as entrepreneurial accidents. So back in, when I was younger, which is many, many years ago, my entrepreneurial accident was when oil and gas got hit with the National Energy Program in Canada. And what that then led to was me being unemployed, which then led into, well, I have to figure out how to feed my family. I was a young parent at that time. And ultimately I got into being an entrepreneur. Actually, the business that I started at that time back in 1984 is still around today. It's one of the businesses that I still own, and it operates today.
And
so
what's that business?
That
business plug in.
Oh, well, for what it's worth, it's called Professional Skate Service, Pro Skate. I've had a number of locations over the years. I'm actually down to 1 location in Edmonton, which is just awesome. I love it. And great team of people there, and that's what it really, really took was just, having that team. I haven't had a key to the store since 2006, so it's interesting to be an absentee owner, but still be in the business with the team.
Okay. And so, what are some of the other ventures that you've accidentally stumbled onto?
Well, again, I went on to the Real Estate Investment Network. In 2006, when I was ready to exit my business in terms of a day-to-day kind of operation. I had started investing in real estate back in about 2000, and along that way I came across the Real Estate Investment Network and met a guy by the name of Don R. Campbell. He wasn't the founder, but he was one of the original guys, and we got to know him a little bit, and we went on vacation with him and his wife one year in 2007. And he said, would you like to, what are you going to do? You've left your business, so now what are you going to do? And I said, I don't know. I'm not quite there yet. And he said, well, do you want to move to British Columbia and, work with me? And I said, sure, yes. So anyways, that then led into me working with him. And in 2011, I ended up buying the business from him. And we went on that journey and that exit, and that's still part of what I do today. Although it's not my primary focus anymore, it's still a big part of what I do and what I like to do.
Okay. Now, from a lot of your business experience now that you've collected and accumulated over the years, what are some of the things that you look at when you're evaluating opportunities? Because we're here at a resource conference, you've got a lot of companies that are making pitches at you now. How do you separate the good from the bad? We heard Rick Rule here talking about the Pareto principle and the 80-20.
Yeah.
How do we focus on and narrow down to that 20%?
Well, it's interesting in this space where you're actually looking at investing capital into a company. There's that aspect of it. So Rick makes a really good point, and I agree 100% with him, which is that we have to look at the people, who's driving that bus. And number one, who's driving the bus, and then what is their skill set in putting the right people on the bus, putting in the right seats on the bus, and then adjusting as they need to. And there's a part of that is interesting, because even when you're looking at business owners and entrepreneurs, and I know many of them, I've worked with thousands of real estate investors who are also, many of them are also business owners, like standalone operational businesses that invest in real estate. There's a part of it that you say, well, what's your track record? And sometimes they don't have any track record. Mm-hmm. And then the assessment's got to be, well, let's have some more conversation, and through that conversation you can start to distill down within their language the way they approach things. I've gotten pretty good 40 some years later into business. I trust my gut in terms of having conversations with people. I strongly believe, and I know this to be true for me, is that you cannot hide behind words. Yeah, there's some great guys that can stretch the truth a long ways, but it always shows up in your language. And even as a coach, when I'm listening to somebody, they're trying to tell me what the problem is, but it's in there telling me that their problem is, they actually get to what the real problem is. And because you just can't hide behind language. So that's a little different conversation, but ultimately, you have to look at the people, you have to look at the leadership, you have to look at the culture of the business is incredibly important. And what is the environment that they're trying to create? And that is, for me, what has seemed to work. I know in my own businesses, what's really important to me is creating a culture within the team that they actually are a huge part of designing. I don't define the culture. In my world, I'll get together with my team, and every year I go, okay, so let's talk culture. What do we want this culture to be about? What do we want the environment to be? They're two separate topics. But so when I'm looking, that's my values, and so when I facilitate those kinds of conversations, I hear about camaraderie, I hear about somebody's got my back, I hear about showing up on time, I hear about no gossip, no complaining, no blaming. Those are the kinds of language that I hear, that I try and get the team to not only buy into, but really truly go, no, if we could create that culture, I would want to work here, and I would want to stay working here. Awesome. So what about the environment? Well, I want this to be clean, I want people to look after and be responsible for what they're doing, I want it bright, I want it shiny, whatever that might be. So the point is this, is when I'm assessing another company, I'm actually looking, at least in the back of my mind, if not seeing it or hearing it or having direct conversation, I want to know that it's there. I want to know the culture, what the team is all about. Longevity speaks a lot. What's turnover? So I look at one of my businesses, my retail business in Edmonton. I've got staff that have been with me 25 years, 20 years, 15 years. And it's a retail environment. It's not like I'm paying $250 a year. So
yeah.
So it really is about people are wanting to work and work hard, and it's not always about money. Yes, it's important, but what I found is that if you're driven just by money, sometimes the clients suffer, because I want it to be about not only my clients, but working conditions and lifestyle, and so people have fun when they come to work. That's a little bit long-winded to your answer, but that's kind of how I even assess other businesses.
Okay, no, that's good. And so you mentioned how important it is to focus on people, on the individuals, and paying attention to their language. And then you talk about coaching people. Now, do you, in your organization, when you're coaching people and you're listening to the words they're saying, at some point you're going to have a point in time where somebody's just not that coachable, and how do you handle that difficult situation?
Well, within the business, when you start to create culture and environment, so if in a business I own, and even within my management team, we have conversations. So I do a check-in once a week or once every 2 weeks with my team. And when I'm talking to my general manager, when we're talking about hiring or who he's got for staff or what's going on, he'll say, oh man, I just got this guy, I think he'd be an amazing sales guy. I go, well dude, hire him. And he's going, yeah, I just don't think he's going to fit in the culture. And I go, don't hire him,
Right.
you know? And we've actually made that mistake over the years, and I say mistake, it's always a learning thing, but you know, we've hired somebody who was awesome sales, like just killer sales, but toxic with the rest of the team in terms of who they were culturally. Sorry, man, you got to go, right? And that's hard to do if you got a guy that's having an impact on that top line. But we found also, this has proven to be true over many years, let that guy go, stay and stand on your values, and then the person that needs to fill the gap, the right person, will show up. Mm-hmm. And that's that. On the coaching side of it, you know, we've been coaching for a long time, and you know, 20, 30, 25, I was going to say 25, closer to 30 years of working one-on-one, one-on-many. But even when I do my group coaching programs, you know, my wife Stephanie and Stephanie's a world and Olympic class high performance coach, mental performance coach. We have a fundamental saying, which is, we're coaches, not coaxes. You know, if you're here for coaching, great. If you're here for coaxing, you're in the wrong program. And so that means that part of our filter process is we want somebody is coachable and who doesn't have a lot of ego around being coached. And I can speak to that one with a lot of experience, because one of the most difficult things that I had to get over is being coached. And because when I heard being coached, my pattern, this was many years ago as a younger man, when I heard being coached, I heard being wrong. My ego told me, oh, you're not that good, you're not that smart. And it's so ridiculous, is that's why I hired a coach. Yet my ego got in my way of being coached because I had to know it all. I should have been smarter. So it's an interesting dynamic, you know, that you learn over the years. But that's an important part of our own coaching and the coaching programs and the filter process that we have. I'm not going to talk anybody into it. You know, we either align, you like what I say, and you go, wow, I kind of agree with his values. And you know, anybody who's even looking for a coach, that's part of your own filter system. Do they align with your values? You know, and if they do, then you're probably heading in the right direction.
Okay, so you bring up an interesting point there in your own mind shift to become coachable. Would you say that that's a huge roadblock for a lot of people? Is that like the ego and just kind of maybe give a few thoughts on what comes to mind when you're talking about a person's ego and how that can stand in their way?
Well, it depends on how you look at ego. You know, most people look at ego and think that, they may see somebody as arrogant as an example, and they go, man, that guy's got a big ego. And that's certainly a part of ego, but ultimately our ego is there I look at ego as part of our identity, right? And ego is there for a couple of different reasons, but ego always wants to protect itself.
Right.
And it will protect itself by either overstating what it is, look at me, I need attention, or it'll understate. So there are those individuals whose ego keeps them small. So our ego protects us. It protects our identity. What we see, what it sees is our identity. Now this gets a little bit kind of nuanced and complex and maybe a little bit deep, but ultimately, as much as we think ego is elevating us, we have to be very careful, because ego will keep us playing small, and it protects itself.
And how would that manifest itself for a person? What does that look like? Where for a person that is, maybe they're trying to do great things in the world,
right?
How would that come into play then?
I got a perfect example of that. When, before I started the podcast, I was feeling some pressure from peers saying, write a book. I didn't feel like I had a book in me, and I wasn't really, and to this day, I'm not inspired to write a book. Although, from a business point of view, I know that would probably serve me, but I'm just not feeling like I've got a book in me, and I want it to be unique and different. Although there is no new ideas, there's nothing new. It's just how you say it, and people hear it differently, and I know all those stories. But anyways, when I was sitting on the beach one day, we had taken a vacation. I was in St. Lucia, sitting on the beach and thinking about what do I want to do. And I literally don't know where the idea of the podcast popped into my mind. It might have been something I was reading that day. And I thought to myself, I should start a podcast. Immediately, my ego kicks in. You're not smart enough. Nobody will listen to you. Who the hell are you to start a podcast? And so through that time I was on vacation, I was journaling and I was writing, and I went, oh, that's my ego trying to protect me from putting myself out there. To this day, I think one of the most difficult things that I do, although it's easier, is put myself into that public space. And you have to get to a point where you have to let go and go, it doesn't really matter what anybody thinks of me. There are going to be a lot of people that actually like me. They like how I present, they like how I speak, they like my cadence, they like my beard, they like my message. And then there's going to be those others that look at this and in like 20 seconds they go, I'm out. This guy's an idiot, whatever. And I go, okay, and then you have to get to a point where you don't care. So that's ego. At that point was saying to me, play small. And if there was some guidance in this particular interview, if I gave it to anybody, is don't let that get in your way. As a matter of fact, even now, 8 years later, I should have turned up the volume a long time ago.
Oh, interesting.
So,
okay.
But there's no shit. I've been on my journey, so I don't live too much in regret.
No, that's good. And wasn't really intending on the conversation to go this way. It was just kind of
that's the thing. What it does.
This is great. Now, just to bring it back to the conference here, you picked up a couple interesting little things there. What was it you got? Should we show the world?
Hold on, I didn't know where. Oh, there it is, actually, right there. Yeah, there you go. See, look at you came. I bought shiny things. Just a couple pieces of silver, 3 ounces to be exact.
3 ounces.
Yeah, there's a 2 ounce. There's a 2 ounce piece in there that's a little bit of a collectible, I think.
Okay.
I'm not into collectibles. I'm just in it for the utility of silver and the monetary value.
Yeah. Now we've been hearing a lot about that at the conference, and a lot of people are talking about silver. So we'll see what. There's so many people talking about silver here.
Yeah.
Might be a time to sell. I don't know.
Yeah, you never know.
But that you're talking about the monetary. You mentioned the monetary value in the silver, and we were chatting about that a little bit earlier about some interesting things and how that plays into in a way of what brings everybody here. They want to learn a little more about the what to invest in. What are the big trends that all these data points that are out there, and how they can formulate a decision to really based on what to do next.
Yeah. And
when you look at some of the things that are going on in the international situation, we can bring that down to Canada here. We heard Aaron Gunn speak earlier on some of the national issues, and then down to local issues. Yeah. What are some things that come to mind for you with some of the international factors that we've been hearing about in the news, and how that factors into what you're going to do next?
Well, when you come to an event like this, you start to realize that as big as this event, there's several thousand people here. I mean, it's not the norm of what we would call the general public or the masses, right?
A little bit of an echo chamber.
Yeah, it is much that way. But having said that, it also confirms that maybe what we're researching and finding out. So I don't listen to my mainstream media, and I haven't for many, many years, but certainly the past 4 or 5 years I've turned up the off button on my mainstream media stuff. I just don't listen to any of it anymore. And those are, at the risk of criticizing some of the anchors, they're just scripted. There's not journalism in it. They call themselves journalists, but if you're not an investigative journalist, I don't really call you a journalist. I might call you an opinionist, I might call you a sensationalist, but rarely is there any what I would call investigative journalism happening. So I just stay out of the mainstream media stream of thought. Having said that, there's a lot of research that has to go into creating a thesis and developing a thesis that's saying, okay, when I look at where we're going economically, whether as a country, at the end of the day, where we're at as a country, we're at the effect of what's going on, south of our border, in the U.S. And of course, when we look at the global macro and we start to see what's going on in Russia, Ukraine, China, Taiwan, North Korea, what's happening in the UK, Germany melting down. I mean, there's
Middle East, of course.
Middle East, UAE, all of that. So there's a lot of disruption. And when we look at what the East versus West and how that's starting to unfold, having to bring some kind of productivity back into our country that we all shipped offshore, and Canada being a non-productive, non-producer, sadly, relative to what we have available from resources point of view, then I, as an investor, have to say, okay, where do I hedge my bet? How do I mitigate risk? Now, of course, being in the real estate game, I own some real estate, and I've invested in real estate over the years a lot. And that's been my primary focus. Having said that, several years ago, I started looking at precious metals. I started looking at equity market. I started looking at other places to place capital to kind of hedge my bet on the devaluation, the monetary, flood that we have of the supply, money supply. And precious metals happens to be one of those things that is appealing to me, as is any hard asset. Again, real estate, certainly some equity. And as we were here this past couple of days, looking at some of the junior miners that are out there, and I'm going, okay, those are speculative investments. But having said that, I'm not going all in on anything.
Right.
So do I have some room for some speculative assets? I have to sit back and look at it and go, yeah, probably.
And then where does it fit in with your
Where does it fit into the overall picture?
Overall picture,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Patrick, what's one takeaway that you would have from coming to the conference? What's some of the chatter that you've been hearing? What's kind of one gut sense or one thing that you can take away from today?
I think, as much as we seek and find confirmation bias, when I come to an event like this, it really opens up my eyes that, number one, I'm on the right path. That's what I need. And again, I get all of the, we're in the echo chamber that we're in. But I also look at some of the speakers and some of the people that I've met and had conversations with, and I would consider them really intelligent, nothing extreme about who they are, what they are. They've done very, very well in their life and in their businesses and with people and financially, and they've done exceptionally well. So I'm looking at that going, there is a path, and there are those individuals who are in alignment and actually have gone before me. So when I consider their views of the world, and I align with their views of the world primarily or mostly, it just gives me some confidence. So when I come to something like this, I get an outside perspective. One of my favorite quotes by Wayne Dyer is, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And I'm always being open to looking at how I'm seeing things and shifting my perspective, and not being drawn into this whole confirmation bias that, oh yeah, no, I was right.
Very easy to get
it's very easy to get
yeah,
there, right?
Yeah.
So I question it all the time and make sure that I'm staying true to that. Trying to get out of the emotion of it is something that you hear time and time again. It's a very emotional time. Investing in general is very emotional. We see that it's happening in the real estate world. First-time home buyers, next-time home buyers, everybody's got an opinion of, and they're looking for somebody to blame. Very emotional. And so in what I coach in the world of real estate, and what RAIN stands for, is don't speculate, invest, which means look at the data and take the emotion out of it. Does the data support the investment? And don't get caught in the headlines, don't get caught in the emotion, don't get caught in the neighbor across the fence. Just do the research.
Gotcha. All right. Now, speaking about real estate, because there's probably going to be one or two people watching here that are involved in real estate, and as soon as they see Patrick Francy, they're going to say, oh, maybe it must be real estate. Now, I'm from Alberta. You've got some holdings in Alberta.
I sure do.
What are some opportunities that you think are going to, that we could see over the next few years in Alberta real estate? Alberta in general, and then we can break it down to a few.
Well, Alberta in general, I think Alberta will do really well. I mean, we've been hammering the drum about Alberta since really 2019. Again, I mean, we've always been bullish on Alberta, and it's been slow to come back around. But 4 years ago, prior to COVID, we'd actually released a report in December of 2019 on COVID. Like, we'd already seen, we didn't know what it was going to represent, we just knew that this was a thing. We actually wrote a report on it and released it December 2019 on COVID and the potential impact. Now, it went on to be far more than we had even imagined. But even pretty early on, when the lockdown started in March 2020, we immediately went into this virtual world and we're telling people about Alberta. We saw the direction. We were, by the end of 2020, we could see where Calgary was going to go. And we were talking, I don't know how much clearer we could have been, was putting capital into Calgary, buying cash flow real estate, being responsible. It's not like just throw money up against the wall, see what sticks. Be pragmatic, be systematic, follow the system, follow the process. And now as we sit here today in 2024, you look at Calgary and you go, well, that was a good run, a good lift so far. More to go, more to come. Now, I'm going to put one little kind of nuanced factor in there, and there is one concern I have. There's two concerns I have with Calgary, and that is, anybody who's from Ontario looking at Calgary, everything looks cheap. And they have a world that they live in Toronto, GTA, many areas of the GTA.
Same idea with Vancouver too.
Exactly, very condo focused. But it's different even than Vancouver. But what they're seeing is that they look into Calgary and they see condos for $290, $350. They go, oh, I'll take three, And it's such a different culture, such a different environment in Alberta when it comes to the condo market. So they're putting capital into pre-construction condos, and I think we're going to start hearing a lot of, we'll start probably in about 2 or 3 years from now, hearing about all of the Ontario and even some BC money that flooded into Calgary and investing in condos. And I can't be any clearer. I've stood on that soapbox, I've said it very loud. If you want to live in a condo, you want to buy a condo, live in it, good for you, got it, lifestyle. From a investment perspective, I get that it's debatable, it's even controversial for some, but I'm saying don't invest in condos in Alberta. Full stop. So that's my stand, and I'll live with that statement. It's been on record many times. Having said that, when you look at the space of duplex where you can start to cash flow, you can't buy a single family, detached, of course, but duplex, triplex, fourplex, six, whatever you might want to do. Those are great opportunities still in that province. Calgary, I'm very bullish on, and even surrounding. I look at, even if you get into Lethbridge or Medicine Hat, for example, great areas. I'm a big fan of Lethbridge, for example. Red Deer's kind of in that middle neutral ground, still okay.
It's kind of steady.
Yep, totally. When you get into Edmonton, I get a little bit nervous right now given the politics of that particular city. And so I think there's an upside, but I don't know that the juice is worth the squeeze in the long run.
Is this the controversy warning here?
Yeah, a little bit of controversy warning, yeah. Having said that, I look around the city, and I look at specifically, let's say, as St. Albert, there's always a tax. They've always had this, they've been heavily taxed, property taxes. It's always been a little bit. It's not that there's not opportunities, again, but I would look to a St. Albert, a Spruce Grove, Nisku, Leduc before I got into Edmonton proper. Now, that's not to say that there isn't opportunities in Edmonton. There is. But you really have to know the area, and you got to go for cash flow. You got to do the math. That's it.
Now, a lot of people are getting into the sixplex, eightplex game in Edmonton now, and the new bylaw changes have really allowed for that, really helped to facilitate a lot of that. There's a lot of people that are taking advantage of the MLI Select program to make that happen. Are you working with anybody right now, or do you have any thoughts on some of those activities going on in Edmonton right now in particular?
Well, when we look at, here's the question as an investor, strategy aside, tactic aside, we have to look at what drives an economy. And so when we look at economic fundamentals and some of the influencers that drive an economy, we're looking at real estate and saying, not where is real estate today, what are they doing today? We have to look and say, what will that real estate be like in 5, 7, 10, 20 years from now? So we have to look down the road. So as much as I look at Edmonton today and I'm questioning it given the political environment, and it's just my own view of it, ultimately I have to say, if I'm going to place capital and I want to say, am I going to get growth? What is the return on that investment over a bare minimum 5 years, but I'm looking at 10, 15 years on a particular piece of property. What am I looking for? I need cash flow. I need some appreciation,
growth, right.
you know, and because interest rates, you know, are not as low as they've historically been, I'm not going to get as much mortgage buy down. So I have to look and say, is that the best place to put my capital? Again, strategy and tactic aside, that's I have to look at economically, how do I see any given city? And so I think there's opportunity in Edmonton. You know, at the time of this particular conversation, we can say, well, historically Edmonton follows Calgary. Given that, you'd think now's the time to get in on Edmonton. I'm not confident it's going to follow the trend of Calgary.
Okay.
I think there may be departure from history in that regard. Now, having said that, some may look at it and go, no, with what's going on in Edmonton, I just don't see enough economically happening in Edmonton. It's a government city. And I don't see enough productivity. When I look at what's happening in Fort McMurray, for example, even Grand Prairie, the oil and gas industry has changed. Suncor, for example, is still going hard, but they're not what they were 10 years ago. And so the jobs that were being driven into, you know, like the employment that was being gained in Edmonton because people were working in Fort McMurray, totally shifted.
Gone now. Well,
you know,
not quite gone, but it's
pretty much gone.
Yeah.
And so when you look at that, you're going, okay, well, what's driving that economy? And those are what if I was going to invest in Edmonton again, put my capital into Edmonton again, I would want to know the answers to those questions as an investor.
Okay. Now, when it comes to things like we keep hearing about the housing crisis all the time. And the federal government's plan is to bring in half a million new immigrants to Canada every year. I know from some anecdotal stories, just talking with even Uber drivers that have been fairly new to the country, they're looking at places like Toronto and Vancouver, too expensive. They look at Calgary. Calgary's prices have started to move up, and some are starting to actually look at Edmonton just based on price and affordability alone. So what are some of your thoughts there?
Well, you know, first off, you know, it was just a recent announcement that the government, literally in the past couple of days, have said they're going to cut back on international students by about 35%. So that's brand new. When you look at over 1 million people coming into this country, you look at permanent residents, non-permanent residents. As an investor, what do I want to know? And here's something that I want to qualify, is that part of treating your real estate investing like a business is saying, okay, well, I've got this client base, and those clients are my tenants. So as an investor, I have to look and say, what's the demand for what I'm providing? And to your point, and to what we know what's happening in Canada, we've got people coming in, they need a place to live. So first phase is, I got to line up of clients. So can I accommodate whatever demographic I'm going to focus on? Some people are going to focus on students. Some are going to be focused on non-permanent residents. Others are going to say, no, I want long-term people that have got big careers and they're professionals, or whatever your demographic is. But you start to have that plan in place. To your point, and this is why we knew Calgary was going to be really, really popular and continue to be, by the way, and then Edmonton is the affordability factor. So in other words, I have businesses in Alberta, I have a residence in Alberta, but I also live outside of Alberta. I live in British Columbia. I travel between the provinces a lot. When I go to Edmonton, or when I go into Alberta in general, it's like everything's on sale. Now, if you live in Edmonton, if you live in Calgary, you're going, what the hell are you talking about? But it's not true. I literally can compare, and that's from groceries to clothes to you name it. Alberta's way less expensive. Plus, we don't have provincial sales tax. You know, I consistently see a minimum spread of gas at 35 cents a liter. I'm always paying at least 35 cents a liter more here in British Columbia, often as much as 50 cents a liter more in British Columbia. And so you start to look at gas, you start to look at food. I don't even want to get into the conversations about vehicle insurance. And as much as Alberta complains about their vehicle insurance, it's nothing compared to what my experience here in British Columbia. So again, why does that matter? It sounds like a complaint, and it's not. It really is. When I'm assessing Alberta as a province, and what I'm sharing with your viewers on here, is that, what does that mean? It means that people are going to move to affordability, and they are moving to affordability. And Alberta, and that's why we're seeing record growth in Alberta. Aside from jobs, the volume of jobs, their average weekly salary is the highest in the country.
Right.
Now, if you're in Alberta, if you're an Albertan, you go, what are you talking about? I don't make nearly enough. Well, okay, got it, but you're still, the highest, your average weekly income in Alberta is higher than anywhere else in the country. So people are moving there for jobs, for higher income, for a much lower cost of living, and for that they can put up with a little bit of cold weather, and ultimately that's it. So we look at real estate in that regard, and we've got this steady stream of clients moving into the province. If we are real estate investors / rental housing providers, we've got a great opportunity.
Okay, terrific. Well, Patrick, we've covered a lot of ground today.
We did. I hope it's helpful.
It was great. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, you bet.
Pleasure having you on here.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Patrick Francy, the Everyday Millionaire. And how do people get in touch with you? How can they follow you?
Well, the best way to get a hold of me, if you want to send an email or something, is ceo@reincanada.com, ceo@reincanada.com. That's probably the simplest way to get in touch with me.
Okay, and your podcast again is the Everyday Millionaire?
Everydaymillionaire.ca.
Okay, terrific. Patrick,
Awesome.
Pleasure. Thanks very much.